Have you ever wondered what life in heaven will really be like? Have you ever wondered if it's going to be a eternally boring, never-ending, eternal church service that will go on and on without end? Or will it be more exciting than all our dreams? The tragedy is, in the lack of teaching in many churches today, you can attend a church for 5 or 10 years and not receive any detailed teaching on what the Bible actually says about heaven. I've had discussions with pastors who said, well, the Bible doesn't actually tell us much about heaven other than it exists. That's not really correct. As we will find in this program, the Bible tells us a lot about heaven. And I hope in this program you're going to find out a lot that will make you anticipate what is the future home of the bride of Jesus Christ. Hello, I'm Grant Jeffery, your host on Bible Prophecy Revealed. When we come to the topic of prophecy, we come to one of the most fascinating topics, which is the prophecies about heaven. Every one of us who is a believer in Jesus Christ will spend the rest of all eternity in heaven with Jesus Christ. Now, we won't only be in heaven because we will be able, in our resurrection body, to travel from heaven to earth, to rule and reign over this planet, to enjoy all the good things of this planet without sin, without disease, without death, without danger. But heaven will be our eternal home. If heaven is our eternal home, don't you think that we should learn much about it, that we would know what God has prepared for the saints that love Him? The Bible tells us that Jesus said to His disciples that He goes to prepare a place for you, and if I go, I'll come again and receive you unto myself. He said, in my Father's house are many mansions. And so God is telling us through the words of Jesus that when we die, we will face a future that is finer than all the dreams we've ever had, that it will be better than anything on life that we have known on this earth. It will not be less than this earth, it will be more. And as we dig into this topic and the research on heaven, you are going to discover that heaven will be the greatest adventure we've ever known. Today we're going to be examining one of my favorite topics, which is heaven. The promise of heaven, a future finer than all your dreams. You know, I used to, in church, when I was about to speak on heaven, do a test to the audience. I would ask them a question. I said, imagine that there is a button on the pew in front of you. Imagine that by reaching forward and pressing that button, you would be instantly transformed to heaven, right now, with all those you love. Honestly now, would you press that button? I got a unique reaction. Among those older Christians, I usually found that there would be a number of those Christians who would be anticipating, smiling, and almost looking for that button. They were older Christians who, as a result of their own Bible study, as a result of the excellent Bible teaching that they had received, believed so strongly in heaven that it was as real to them as New York City. They longed to go there. And they were ready to go whenever God wanted them to go. They weren't suicidal. They were happy to stay here as long as God would allow them to have good health. But they knew the reality of heaven. On the other hand, the younger part of the audience almost inevitably were fidgeting. They weren't looking for any button, even hypothetically. When I would ask them privately to tell me why, even hypothetically, they wouldn't press such a button, the answers would go something like this. I'd like to wait until I am 89 years old with one foot on a banana peel and one foot in the grave, and then I'll press that button, Grant. Then I'm ready to go to heaven because it's much better than the alternative. Why do they have this attitude among general Christians who have an understanding of salvation, believe in Jesus Christ, believe in heaven, believe in the Bible? Why would they have this reluctance to contemplate going to heaven now? I believe the answer is clear. There has been a real vacuum of teaching about heaven during our generation. If we go back to my parents' and my grandparents' generation, heaven was spoken of by pastors from the pulpit often. People discussed it. They studied the Word of God. But in our busy, hectic lifestyle,
The average Christian doesn't have as much time as they should for Bible study. And many pastors are preaching about other things than prophecy and certainly other things than heaven. And yet, it is the place where we are going to spend eternity. This life of 70 or 80 years will pass in a blink of an eye. But heaven will go on forever. If we believed in heaven in greater detail, with greater knowledge, I believe we as Christians would not fear death, that we would face death whenever God's time for us was up with calm, knowing that what He had ahead of us was so much greater, so much more exciting than what has gone before. One of the problems I've encountered in people's thinking about heaven is the fact that the average Christian, in the lack of teaching, believes that heaven is going to be unutterably boring. They imagine heaven, according to what they have told me, as one long, eternal church service of music from angels that will never, ever, ever end. And that, based on their own experience in church, does not seem very appealing to them. But is that what the Bible tells us about heaven? Absolutely not. The Bible indicates that heaven is going to be active, that we are going to be in our new resurrection body, that we're not only going to be able to travel throughout heaven and to earth, but throughout the whole universe in a body like Jesus' resurrection body when He rose from the dead, where He could appear in heaven and back on earth, or He could appear in Galilee or appear in the middle of the upper room and then disappear. We will have a body like Jesus' body, according to Philippians. And also 1 John 3:3 tells us that our body in the resurrection will be like His body. If we understand the reality of heaven, we will not fear it, nor will we imagine that it is going to be a boring existence. In fact, it will be more exciting than the most exciting day we've ever had on earth. Another of the problems that I believe that has afflicted most people comes about from a rather unfortunate translation in the King James Bible that has been copied by many other Bibles, which talks about heaven, quoting the book of Revelation, and talks about, and there shall be time no more. What does this phrase really mean, there shall be time no more? Well, to you and I in our 21st century, we look at it and say, well, I guess that actually means that the Bible is saying there's no time in heaven. Well, since we are creatures of a three-dimensional universe that we live in time, I would suggest to you that it is impossible for us to even conceive of living without time. And so if we imagine that there's no time in heaven, in eternity, that eternity is the lack of time, then obviously heaven would be unutterably boring because there's nothing you can do. You need time in which to do things. But is that what the Bible said? No. If you look at a good new translation, the NIV or the New King James or any of the others, you'll find that expression in Revelation is rendered, there shall be time of delay no more. In other words, what God was saying is the angel's about ready to pour out His judgment, and God says through the Apostle John, there will be time of delay no more. Now the judgment's going to fall. He is no way saying there will be no time in heaven. And how can I prove this? Because we're told that in the New Jerusalem in heaven, eternally, that there will be 12 types of fruit, a different fruit for each of the 12 months. It talks about day and night taking place. Even though there will be no night in the city of God, the New Jerusalem, there is going to be day and night on earth. God has said in Jeremiah in His covenant with Israel, He said He would sooner break His covenant with day and night and with the seasons than He would with His covenant that is eternal with Israel. And so when we get away from the idea that there's no time in eternity and in heaven, then eternity is not the absence of time, it is the fullness of time. It's time without end. Imagine what you would do if there were no time limitations, and you knew you could not fail. Right now, according to scientists, we are using less than 10% of the brain that God has given us. Even Einstein, they believe, did not fully use more than 10% of his brain. And that means that we certainly use less than that. But imagine what it will be like in heaven when we actualize all that God has given us. When without all the problems and the degeneration of sin from the fall of man, we have a mind that is able to learn everything at once and remember everything. What would you study if you could not fail and you had unlimited time? Imagine meeting with Abraham and Isaac and Jacob and all the Old Testament patriarchs and prophets. Imagine meeting with King David and Solomon and the great other historical figures. Meeting with all the disciples. Meeting in the presence of Jesus himself. Heaven is going to be the most exciting social interaction we could possibly imagine. Meeting with Martin Luther and all the great saints of the faith and throughout all of history. To be able to talk to them about their lives and what they learned. To be able to learn and grow. Imagine the quality of the relationships you'll have when you will no longer have petty gossip and backstabbing, no longer envy, or any of the things that interfere even with Christian relationships. God has promised us a life that is beyond our ability even to fully imagine. Twice in the Bible it says, the eye hath not seen, nor ear heard, neither hath entered into the heart of man the things that God hath prepared for those that love him. Yet after that happened, after Paul wrote that in his epistles, John was given a remarkable revelation of the reality of heaven. And when he was lifted up to heaven, what he saw were real things. Heaven is not immaterial. It's not ghostly. Heaven is real. It has a capital city, the New Jerusalem, that we're going to discuss in great detail in a further program. But heaven itself is vast. It holds today, as its inhabitants, innumerable companies of angels, who some of them surround the throne of God in the hundreds of millions singing, Holy, 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 to Jesus Christ. Heaven contains the cherubim, the seraphim, other angelic classes of being. The Bible indicates that all the saints that have died in the Old Testament and all the saints that have died in the New Testament period, right up until today, are now presently in the presence of Jesus, joyfully, consciously with him, but they don't yet have a resurrection body. They are waiting for the rapture, perhaps even more anxiously than we, because they know that when they receive their resurrection body like Jesus, they will then be able to fully enjoy not only heaven but the universe. Right now, they cannot wear crowns. They cannot really use golden mansions because they don't have a body. They cannot come to earth and rule and reign because to do that you must have a body. But the day will come when all the Old and New Testament saints, and ourselves as well, will receive a resurrection body fit for eternity. What will that body be like? Well, Jesus, when he appeared in the upper room after his crucifixion, he had told his disciples who were doubting and thinking they might have seen a ghost, he said, I am not a ghost, I'm not a spirit. He said, come and touch me, see that I'm real. Then he asked to eat broiled fish and honeycomb. Why would he have done that? I believe Jesus was trying to demonstrate in the most practical way possible that in the resurrection, we will have a body that can eat and drink. We're told in Revelation 19 that we are going to be participating in the Battle of Armageddon. In the Bible, just before that, we are going to be participating in the marriage supper of the Lamb. We're going to eat and drink with Jesus. I know some would ask, is that not just simply a symbol? Well, Jesus at the Passover supper said to his disciples, I will not eat of the fruit of the vine until I eat it anew with you in heaven. Clearly, we are going to be able to eat and drink in heaven, although we do not require it. We would not die if we could not, because our bodies will be immortal. They will be incorruptible, incapable of disease or accident or death. We know even that angels eat. The Bible tells us in the book of Psalm 78 that when talking about the manna that God supernaturally provided for the children of Israel in the Exodus, God says that they ate the corn of heaven. They ate angels' food. God gave them manna to the full. So manna is one of the foods that angels eat. Not the only food, but one of them. So we know that angels eat. We know that angels have a body that though it is supernatural and can appear and disappear at will, We know that angels have a body that is also physically real, that so much so that they can actually eat, they can wear clothes. We're told that angels sometimes appear upon us unawares, and many fascinating stories have been told by credible Christians of angelic intervention in their lives. Heaven is going to be more real than you could ever possibly imagine. In heaven, we are going to have cities. We are going to be able to travel from the heavenly cities, which will be our natural home, especially the New Jerusalem. We'll be able to travel down to earth to enjoy all the good things of an earth that will have no sin, no temptation left. The human beings that survive Armageddon and throughout the millennium will continue to live into the new earth. The new earth that will have no sin, no temptation, no disease. It will have prosperity and justice. And God's purpose is that we, the church, the resurrected saints in our resurrected bodies, will be able to rule and reign with Jesus Christ during that time. The promise of heaven is simply extraordinary. It is real. We will be active. We will be growing. One of the questions I'm often asked is, will we recognize our loved ones? There is not a single thing in the Bible that suggests we will not. When we see Elijah and Moses appear on the Mount of Transfiguration, they were recognizable to the disciples. They looked as they expected them to look like. And so I believe as Jesus came back from his resurrection and was recognizable by the people, he taught to people during the 40 days, and over 500 were still alive in 63 AD when Paul wrote, who had seen him teaching in those 40 days. That we also will look like ourselves, only perfected. If we were blind, now we'll see. If we were lame, now we'll walk. But the blueprint that God has given us in our DNA, the perfect you, I believe God will use in our resurrection body to produce a perfect you without any defect whatsoever, without sin, without even the propensity for accident, for disease, and for death. Ever since the Garden of Eden, mankind is born to die. From the moment we're born, the cells in our body begin to die. But that was not the way God originally intended it to be. God intended that we would live forever in a body that would be fit for eternity, perfect. That entropy itself, the tendency of metal to rust and for life to wear itself out, is part of the sin nature that comes from the fall of man. It will be eradicated in heaven, will not exist. Even the heavens themselves, that part of them that has been polluted when Satan appeared before the throne of God to accuse Job, as we're told by Paul, he also comes to appear and accuse us. That will be cleansed from the pollution of his presence. Heaven will be the heavenly city. Jesus Christ said in John 14, said, I go to prepare a place for you, and if I go, I'll come again to receive you unto myself. He said, in my Father's house are many mansions. God has prepared mansions for you and I. He's prepared a life beyond anything we could ever possibly imagine. In that life, we will see the love of Jesus Christ revealed. He's been preparing the glories of heaven and the New Jerusalem for us for now almost 2,000 years. Look at this beautiful earth, despite the pollution of sin and the fall of man. All of what Christ created on this earth was done in 6 days. He's been working on the New Jerusalem for 2,000 years. The glories that await us are almost beyond our ability to even imagine. But they are real, my friend. And we need to live as the Christians of old lived, living not in light of the 70 years or so that we have on this life, but living in the light of eternity, because Jesus Christ is coming soon to take us home.
Every time I teach on the topic of heaven and throw it open to questions and answers, I receive the most amazing questions, but some of them keep coming up time and time again. People are wondering about the reality of heaven. They're wondering about relationships. They wonder about the things that they will do, the nature of our body in heaven. And so I have asked people over the years that I have taught about heaven to send me in questions by email and by letters and occasionally in church conferences. And some of the questions that I have received including the following. Will we retain our character and personality in heaven? That's a great question. The Bible indicates that our personhood will continue, that it is eternal. God created your soul, and that soul is a result of all the experiences and your response to those experiences that you've had in your life, to your parents, to your loved ones, etc. And that personality is going to continue in heaven. How do we know? Well, we know that on the Mount of Transfiguration that they saw Elijah and Moses, and they were obviously not only physically what was expected by the Jewish people from their traditions, but that they were themselves. We're told that Elijah would return, and he would return obviously as he was before. And it is more than probable that among the two witnesses, that while Elijah is certainly one and is stated so by Malachi, that Moses is the other, one of the most unique individuals and personalities in all of history. Jesus, when he rose from the dead, had his own personality as before and was recognizable, loved those people he loved before, and had those relationships. We know that thousands of Old Testament saints rose when he rose, according to Matthew 27, 52 and 53. And it is every bit probable that they recognized their loved ones and were able to identify themselves as to who they were when they died and now were raised from the dead. There are writings from that time that suggest that very thing. I believe we will be ourselves, only now perfected. All the sin nature that we have had will be removed from our body, from our mind, from our spirit. We will be the perfect you that you were always meant to be. And imagine the relationships you'll have in a life when you have no more petty bitterness and gossip and backstabbing or any of the things that corrupt human relationships. Another question that I have often received is, will our loves and family relationships continue in heaven? That is a very delicate question, but I believe, again, the preponderance of Scripture and what I have found in talking to many very wise and respected Bible teachers privately is that they do believe that relationships will continue, that there's no logical or spiritual reason why we would not still love our children, our parents, our best friends. There's nothing in the Bible that would suggest we would either forget who we were, that we would become a blank slate, as some have suggested. There's nothing in the Scriptures that suggests that whatsoever. In fact, I believe that the quality of our relationships will be far finer than anything we've ever had before, and they will be eternal. Imagine what it will be like to be reunited to your child that you had to bury as a young child who died prematurely. Imagine what it will be like to be reunited with a lost loved one that you had to bury because they died prematurely. Imagine the quality of the relationships you'll have, not only with people you've known, but people you've admired from afar through the reading of the Bible and history. Those relationships will continue and will be enhanced beyond anything we have today because we will be sinless. We will be perfected. Our relationships will be honest and perfect as Christ always intended that they would be. And so when I am asked this question, there's always a more difficult question that sometimes is raised privately and sometimes in a private letter. And that is a very delicate one, and that says, well, what about a hypothetical situation where a woman married a Christian man, they were both Christians, lived faithfully with Jesus Christ, and one of them passed away. Now the other, after a period of time, marries another Christian. And now they live a wonderful life together, perhaps have additional children, and now they both die. And the question, of course, and I know you can anticipate it, is they have asked me whose husband or wife will they be in heaven if relationships continue. Well, the Bible says literally nothing about the continuation of physical love in heaven. People have speculated both ways, but the Bible literally does not give us a slam dunk answer. But it does indicate in every way that relationship, loves, and friendship will continue. Who they will be related to in heaven, I believe that will have to be left to the judge of all the earth, who knows best. There will be no confusion in heaven. I believe that anything on earth that we have lost that is replaced in heaven will be replaced with something so much better. It will be like a child who loves playing in the sandbox today, but when he grows older and has become mature, he replaces the sandbox with much better toys, which much better interest that fascinate him through the rest of his life. And so anything that is on this earth that we will not find in heaven, I believe we'll find something so much better, so much finer, so much grander, that we will not go through heaven and eternity missing that which was on earth but is not in heaven. The Bible simply doesn't tell us the details about those kind of questions, and probably for very good reason. But what the Bible does tell us is that heaven is beyond even our ability to imagine. The Bible tells us that eye hath not seen, nor ear heard, neither hath entered in the heart of man the things that God hath prepared for those that love him. Remember this: Jesus Christ created this universe, this earth, with all its awesome beauty and variety, with millions of different species, and he did it all in 6 days. And he said to his disciples that he's going to prepare a place for us. And he's been working on that for 2,000 years. No wonder the Bible says the eye hath not seen nor ear heard, neither hath entered in the heart of man what he's prepared for us. It will be beyond our finest dreams. Yet, my friend, it will be absolutely real. Heaven will be more real than any day you've ever had on earth. And remember this: anything that is not in heaven, all the good things of God's creation will be on earth. We're told in Ezekiel chapter 47 and 48 that there will even be fishing taking place on earth. We're told that the fishermen will dry their nets by the Dead Sea that's been renewed by fresh water for the multitude of the fish. Life will be real on earth, and we will come to earth to rule and reign, and we will witness all of God's magnificent creation when we are in heaven.